Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. My name's Matt. We're here to talk about anxiety and stress. I'm going to go ahead and get rock and rolling. I think the goal is to be done, because everything's pushed back just a little bit. We'll be done at 11, and then you guys get 10 minutes of travel time, and then the next one will be at 10 after. At least that's what I think. Good morning. How did everybody find Carrie's talk?
Really good.
Yeah, Carrie's a good friend of mine. I've known her for 9 years, 10 years, and she's wonderful and amazing, and her company's wonderful. So if any of you guys have kids at Reset, they're in a good place. My name is Matt Swartz. Hello, welcome.
Hi, sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, don't. This is nothing's that serious. I'm not here to add to your stress. I'm here to decrease it. No big deal. So, hi guys. I'm Matt Swartz. I'm actually a local boy. I graduated from Northville way back in the day. Went off, had some cool adventures. Moved to New York City. Moved back. I'm a therapist in private practice. Along with my wife, we co-own our practice. And I do a lot of cool things, but today we're here to talk about anxiety and stress made simple. My goal is to take something really super duper complicated that I could honestly spend 50 hours talking to you about and try to distill it down into like 45 minutes. The way I kind of work my presentations, if I see a hand, I'll stop. I'll go ahead, ask me a question, no big deal. It's more important for us to connect than it is for me to shout information at you. And if you want me to speak information at you, we can do it some other time. We're all here right now. You guys may have specific needs. Feel free to ask about them, right? Specific things that click for you, that's great. Probably if it clicks for you, it's going to click for somebody else. Cool. For those who are tech-enabled, if you want my slides, happy to give them away for free. No big deal. One option is you can scan that QR code right there. If you are not a QR code person, you can type in your web browser, and you'll see this a couple of times, bit.ly/anxiety-stress-MS for Made Simple. Now, this is going to sound crazy because usually when you type in your web browser, it doesn't matter if anything's capital or not. It matters if this is capital because this is how BitLink works. So it's got to be capital A for anxiety, capital S for stress, capital MS for Made Simple. Otherwise, it will tell you there's no such page, but it's a lie. All you have to do is put your name and email, and then it will take you to the slides. You can download the slides. I promise I won't spam you. I don't even have a newsletter. It just is what my system makes you do. So, no big deal. Okay, so anxiety, stress made simple. Again, I'm Matt Swartz. I work with Evolving Lives. I've been doing therapy work since 2011, so that makes it about 15 years. Went to Columbia, New York. Again, grew up around here. I've had the pleasure to do some really cool work. I do a lot of speaking and training. I've spoken and trained for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, and I've also done nonprofits, local schools. I'm part of a project right now in Western Wayne County where we're coordinating mental health between about 12 different area school districts, which is 9 school districts, 12 high schools, which has just been really incredible. We work on crisis management, peer support training. It's called the Hope and Empowerment Coalition. It's been just amazing to kind of see that bigger picture work being done. But I work with primarily anxiety, trauma. I work with a lot of leaders, high performers, parents. It tends to be my niches. So this is me when I was 23, and this was about the time that I discovered that I had anxiety. I had no idea. And then my first job out of grad school, I started having real trouble on Monday getting to work. And it eventually escalated to a point where I was laying on the floor of the shower. The shower was streaming down on me, and I was having heart palpitations, and I wanted to throw up, and I couldn't go to work. And then I would try to get on the bus. I was in New York at the time. Get on the bus. I could barely handle it. I started throwing up on the bus. I had to get off the bus. I felt so embarrassed and get back on and be late for work. I started skipping some Mondays. They had me drug tested. I was at a drug test program. Turns out I wasn't doing drugs. I was having panic attacks. And that thus began my journey to unwind not only my anxiety, but then ultimately help others begin to unwind theirs. Flash forward to a couple of months ago. We had a premature daughter at about 30 weeks. She's right there. She's doing great. We were in the hospital for about 2 months. It was one of, if not the most challenging experience of my life. But I'm happy to report that with all of the work that I've done, all the therapy I've been to, all the trauma work I've done, I am very grateful for a type of therapy called EMDR. which is basically if you've been to therapy before and you're feeling stuck at about 70% good, you might want to try EMDR. It's kind of the next step. With all that trauma work, I watched myself negotiate this experience with incredible poise and not freaking out and not even feeling that anxious, which even 3 years ago would have been just crazy for me. So I come to you with good news. It works, whether it's for you, for your kids. I just, turns out I was an anxious person and I had to do a lot of work to figure it out, but it's totally possible. So I bring that message to others. So all of this anxiety work I've done for about 15 years, I try to distill it into a 5-step process, okay? So sometimes I call it A-SAFE, sometimes we call it the 5 R's, whatever helps you remember it better, okay? So I'm gonna obviously go through the 5 steps real quickly here, and then I'll break them down at about 10 minutes a time as we go through. So the first step is awareness. You might have heard this with Carrie's talk, right? We want to recognize what's going on, because if we're not aware, like I wasn't aware before I started having panic attacks, but highly suspicious that anxiety would come out of nowhere, yes. So probably things were building up over time and I didn't realize, and then the panic attacks, because they were so big, made me aware. But if we could become aware sooner and sooner, which is, my hope for most parents is to become aware of your child's anxiety sooner, then it's much easier to deal with than, once we get to the end. Second step is simplify. We want to reduce the incoming stimuli in a lot of different ways to help manage the anxiety in the short term. Third step is to accept and release. Carrie mentioned some things about underlying beliefs. We have to understand the underlying fabric that's creating that anxiety, accept it first so that we can heal it and release it. Then we move into the fourth step, which is fulfill. We have to refuel our tank. We have to understand what our needs are and make sure we're pumping in the good things. Because if we're just keeping out bad things, that only goes so far. We got to make sure we're bringing the good things in too. And then finally is evolve. We're working to rewire our brains to live a joyful, fulfilled, meaningful life. And unfortunately, most of our brains were not wired for that. Most of our brains were wired to, keep bad things away, or make everything perfect, or prevent any bad thing from happening ever. And that doesn't work. So we gotta rewire our brain. So these are our 5 steps. We're gonna go through one at a time. Here we go. Okay, so parenting anxiety. Here's where I start every single time. I love this quote. Kids are not attention seeking, they're connection seeking. What does that mean? It means there is nothing more important to our children than the relationship and connection, especially with us as parents. And what often happens is that our distress, our stress, our challenge prevents and gets in the way of that connection. And then that being extremely impactful when they're young, over time, we start to say, these kids don't wanna, they're not listening to me, they're not doing what I want, they're not, especially as we get into those teen years, right? But the reality is that most often, that was bred by disconnection along the way. I'm not blaming you, as Carrie said, you can blame our parents. That's fine, it's all their fault, right? But the reality is, even if that's true, we have to take responsibility for making the change. I know that when I had my first kid, I think probably I'm skipping ahead, but that's okay. I was way angrier than I would have liked to be. I was way more controlling than I would have liked to be. I was way more worrisome and overwhelmed than I would like to be. I have my 3rd kid, just had, like I said, my 3rd child. And I know that if I could go back and parent my first kid like I'm parenting my 3rd, oh my God. But can't take it back, so we're saving up money for the therapy, right? As Carrie said, this is real, guys. Like, you're gonna hear this from pretty much every therapist we talk to. We are not perfect. In fact, we are just regular humans, and the only difference between me and you is I've already started a brokerage account for college and therapy. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is that we can talk to each other and be honest about what isn't going right. One of the keys that I teach my clients, the parents, is the more vulnerable and open you can be about your challenges and your struggles with the kids, the more you normalize their experience, the more they're able to connect, the more support they can seek from you. When you're talking about goals all the time and what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to go, and they feel like they can't hit those targets, that's going to create disconnection, right? So anytime a parent comes into my I don't have an office, I have a virtual office, and says, hey, I'm having trouble with my kids, the first goal is we've got to work on connection first. then we can do all of the fancy stuff, okay? Make sense? Seem fair, right? I'm not blaming you. We are disconnected from ourselves, right? So of course we're disconnected from our children. You can only be as connected to others as you are to yourself. Does that make sense, right? If you took care of yourself half as well as you try to take care of your kids, right? We'd be in business. We're probably not doing that. The better we can take care of ourselves, the better parents we can be to our children, okay? Oxygen mask on first, then theirs. Cool, great. So let's, as I said, we're gonna start with awareness. So when we're looking at anxiety, there's really 4 categories of anxiety symptoms that let us know that we're dealing with anxiety. Everybody's a little different. Everybody has a different constellation, okay? Category 1, physical anxiety symptoms, things that we feel in our body. Okay, I'm gonna read this like a medication commercial, okay? Side effects of anxiety may include headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, muscle tension, shortness of breath, nausea, increased irregular heart rate, shakes, tingling, extremities, feeling lightheaded, restlessness, issues sleeping. There's a lot of, and honestly, it's anything, right? Anxiety can present as any physical symptom in your body. Usually what happens is if you have a physical issue already, you already have stomach stuff, already have head stuff, anxiety just puts pressure and squeezes those systems, and that's where we see the anxiety presenting itself. Does that make sense? Right? So we have maybe pre-existing vulnerabilities that the anxiety kind of comes through. Next is cognitive, things that we think, right? Basically worries, right? But in the clinical term, we say they're repeated, negative, and intrusive, right? They keep happening again and again. They're negative rather than positive, and it seems like they're coming at us, right? Like we're not choosing the thoughts, they're kind of coming in. Does that make sense? Yeah? And then we have emotional symptoms of anxiety, things we feel. Obviously, there's tons of emotions, but there's 4 main emotions. Fear, which is kind of obvious, right? Fear, worry, anxiety all kind of come together. But then we see a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, and a lot of guilt. These are the primary emotional symptoms of anxiety. And then finally, we have behavioral symptoms. These are things we do. What do anxious kids do? What do anxious parents do? It tends to fall into 3 categories. We avoid, right? I don't want to go to their house. I don't want to go to the thing. I don't want to do the work, right? We control. Carrie was talking about control. I'm also a controller. Most business owners are. And then people pleasing, right? And I always try to highlight this, especially for young women, right? For our daughters, tend to be a lot of people pleasing, and then they fly under the radar through school until the problem becomes big enough in their young adulthood because the system has gotten so much bigger and they can no longer please everybody, and now they're falling apart. So I try to catch that younger, I try to catch that early. When I see somebody constantly dismissing their own needs, trying to make every adult happy, I say, I know there are no problems, but this is anxiety too. Make sense? Seem fair? Right? So if you're thinking of your kid with anxiety or yourself with anxiety or somebody in your life, your parent with anxiety, you may see more of one of these types of symptoms. You may have a child who's more a cognitive thinker. Oh my God, what about this or what about that or what about this? You may have a really emotional child who has those big emotions saying, oh, never. Yep, that's it. You may have a child who's constantly avoiding or trying to control, right? You may have a child, my son, my 7-year-old son, every time he eats, he says, my tummy hurts. We did the blood panels, we did this, we went to the gastro. Of course he has anxiety, right? Of course he does. And we're gonna catch it early. We're gonna do our best, right? But it's not the food, turns out, right? It's his system is feeling stressed. So, any questions about this? We have to start here because if we don't know what we're looking for, we can't do anything about it. Yeah? Great. Okay, so the second biggest question I get, right, what is anxiety, what does it look like, is how does it happen? How does it get bigger over time? How did we go from this cute, sweet little child to, right? So 6 steps, I call it the stress and anxiety feedback loop. Step number 1, there's a cue or a trigger. Oh, I should back up. I want you to think of this loop both in a moment, anxiety increases in a moment, but also over time, okay? So there's a cue or trigger. Could be internal or external. An external trigger is something that happens in the world. Somebody bullies me, there's a really challenging homework assignment, right? An internal trigger it could be one of those physical symptoms or something I think about or feel, right? Nothing's really going on per se, but it's going on in here, right? So there's some type of cue or trigger that sets me off, okay? In response, there's going to be an automatic state of mind, some kind of thought, some kind of emotion, right? Somebody bullies me, they don't like me, I'm not good enough, difficult homework assignment, I'll never figure this out, this is too big for me, right? Feeling in my stomach, oh, I can't make this stop, right? There's some kind of reaction or response. Number 3, almost always following is some kind of physical symptom, some kind of distress or pain. Maybe we notice it, maybe we don't, but it's in response to that feeling or that thought. Then comes the behavior. And I know I said there's 3 categories of behavior. You can make it even more simple. There's really only 2. Is, do I cope? Do I do something proactive, right? Or do I avoid? And if I avoid, I feel powerless or helpless or less powerful, right? And if I cope, I feel more confident, more powerful, more capable, right? For anxiety, obviously, if the feedback loop is going down, there's a lot of avoidance that's going on, okay? Now, here's what happens. Number 5, no matter what, could take an hour, could take a day, could take 3 days, that anxiety will decrease, no matter what. Your physical symptom cannot support continued anxiety. At some point it diminishes, okay? So then question number 6 is, what did we learn? Did we learn to successfully cope, right? And decrease that response and become more calm? Or did we learn avoidance behaviors and that we increase the response, right? And fundamentally, we're avoiding our own emotion. We're avoiding our own reaction. Does this make sense? So the more we avoid, the more we don't know what to do, the worse it gets, da-da-da-da-da-da-da over time. Yeah? Making sense?
Yeah.
Any questions? Great, okay. That means I'm doing my job. Again, I try to make this super, super simple, okay? Being a conscious, aware human being produces pain. There are, in the bottom of your brain, in your little reptile lizard brain, and your little amoeba cellular brain, there is really 2 responses. Me want, ah! And that's it. That's everything we do. I'm either going towards something I want, or I'm going away from something that might be painful. Every single human behavior can be categorized into those 2 situations. So as anxiety builds, it may be a type of wanting. Carrie was talking about feeling not enough, and how that feeling of not enoughness as a child or adult drives what you might call more, more, more. I need. I'm attaching to things. Don't take this away from me, right? I feel a sense of lack. I might even feel empty. So I'm grabbing, right? Or you might have a resistor. This is too much, right? Some kids with anxiety, loud noises, overstimulating things. My youngest, well, my middle. This is too itchy. It's too itchy. What do you mean it's too itchy? It's just a shirt, right? It's a soft one. It's jersey fabric. It's nice, right? No, it's too itchy. What he's saying is it's overwhelming. It's too much sensory input, right? So that produces the fear. We're trying to prevent we're feeling overwhelmed. Now, I'm not saying it's one or the other. We tend to all have a combination of the both, but most of our anxious kids, we can kind of sort them into more predominantly one category or another. I have an overstimulated, overwhelmed kid that just wants space. That's my middle kid. He'll just go off and play Legos on his own. That's all he wants. Meanwhile, when my oldest kid gets distressed, Daddy, and he's like, he can't sit next to me. He does this thing where he kind of like sits like on me, right? He's like pushing and pressing against me. My wife says that when a dog does that, they're trying to like claim you and dominate you. So I guess my kid wants to I don't know. But so 2 very different responses to anxiety, right? My oldest wants more because he's feeling a sense of lack. I can tell you why, because in his first 3 years, his dad was not totally available, overwhelmed, angry, did a lot of pushing away. So my child has this feeling, right, where he wants more. And that's not just it, but that's an example, right? Meanwhile, my second, I had way more capacity. I chased him throughout the house, right? Come here. No, he wipes off my kisses. They're too late, right? So it just we create these patterns very early. And then, and again, it's not just me. I'm not saying it's all my fault. But do these patterns make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I want you to reflect on them for yourself, right? A lot of perfectionists, a lot of high performers. I work a lot in Novi, Northville, Plymouth, right? Tend to be high performing parents, we're doing our big jobs, all of this thing. A lot of us tend to be wanters, tend to be like not feeling enough, right? I gotta make more money, I gotta do bigger things, I gotta get a promotion, I gotta do this, I gotta schedule 12 sports things for our kids, right? And I'm not saying we don't see resistors, absolutely we do. Those of you who are more introverted, those of you who want more space. Carrie was talking about not wanting to be out past 9:30, right? I am the exact opposite. I would love nothing more than to put my kids to bed and like go out to an electronic concert. I know this is silly, right? But you know, I'm a wanter. Give me more, right? My wife says I'm a black hole. There's never enough, you know. And so, does this dichotomy make sense? Any questions about this? Okay. So I've made you aware. Right? I can get into way more detail. I've got tons of awesome slides. I'm going to skip them because my job is to give you the bottom line right now, okay? Great. So, the one I won't skip. Carrie was talking about presence and awareness, right? The foundation of how all of this psychology stuff works is there are 3 stages to being awake, aware, and alive. And the way in which our either joy or anxiety grow is all within this secret. So first stage is perception. We take in information about the outside world through our sensory organs, right? I taste it, I smell it, I touch it, I hear it, I see it, yeah? So I'm taking in information. The second stage is I interpret that information based on past experience, okay? So stage 1, I see a dog, a black dog walking down the street. I'm on the sidewalk. It's not 20 degrees out, so we're not in a hurry. Okay. Oh, nice, a dog, right? My interpretation, there's 2 of me. One of me got bit by a dog when I was a kid. The other has 2 dogs at home. I have 2 dogs at home. I did get bit by a dog as a kid. The one with 2 dogs at home goes, ooh, puppy, right? I wanna, you know, right? And the one who got bit as a kid goes, I don't want it, right? So my interpretation, same dog, same sidewalk, same moment, 2 different histories, 2 different experiences, and then I respond differently. I either approach that dog or go to the other side of the street, okay? Every single experience in the world that you're having is down to this formula, right? Carrie was talking about the gap. This is the gap. Stimulus, response, right? So if we can widen this gap, if we can take a little break between what we see and how we interpret it. My kid's supposed to be brushing his teeth. He's doing 7-year-old stuff, right? Perception, I see him, interpretation. You're supposed to be. Ooh, hey, oh, hang on. Is he supposed to be? Who says he's supposed to be? He's 7. He's supposed to be doing that BS. That's what he's doing, right? That's what 7-year-olds do. Okay, hang on. Take a step back, right? I had to unwind this over the years because my first automatic reaction was, stop it, stop playing. You know, it's 7:30. You're supposed to stop playing at 7:30, obviously, right? They do not have the capacity. It's an unfair requirement. And the more I try to control that, the more his anxiety grows, right? So this is for any given situation. It could be schoolwork stuff, it could be bullying, it could be connection with you, it could be electronic use, it could be any of these things. We're in some kind of cycle where what we're gonna need to change is the interpretation. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. In order to do this, we have to lighten the load first. So we move into simplify, okay? Simplify to reduce. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna skip that. I'm gonna tell you a story, right? So I didn't know I had anxiety, but I definitely knew I had ADHD. In 2nd grade, I was diagnosed very early. I guess it was obvious. Couldn't shut up in class. This is me. This is my cute little self, right? But the real story, Carrie started mentioning intergenerational trauma. The real story is, on my mother's side, my family went through some really intense immigration experiences based on persecution in the Middle East. There was killing and pillaging and, you know, all sorts of horrible things that they ran away from. And so there's something in my DNA that goes, this is all gonna fall down and fall apart and everything's gonna blow up for you, right? And then I could go with things on my dad's side or whatever, right? But there's this whole science called epigenetics that shows us how our lived experience, or our parents' lived experience, or our parents' parents' lived experience becomes encoded on top of our DNA, and then becomes part of our child's DNA, and also part of the DNA we're part of the cells that we're producing in our body. In other words, if you are living your life and then have a traumatic experience, after that traumatic experience, your cells are now changing the way they're replicating in response to that traumatic experience, right? So those that I have never met somebody with anxiety that on some level can't find some parenting challenges or find some intergenerational trauma challenges, right? And so ultimately these big giant unsolved problems become part of our nervous system, even though they may not directly be in our experience, okay? So, and then this adds up over time. So I want you to think of a cup, okay? Some people have bigger cups, some people have smaller cups. This is the size of your nervous system. I was born with a smaller cup, not this nice big cup, right? So genetics define those possibilities, right? Some of us have anxious families, some of us less, right? There's some sort of genetic decision around how big this cup is. Then my early childhood experience is going to really define how I see and experience the world. Those first 5 years that you don't even remember were the most impactful. Most of the science shows us about 80 to 85% of our initial brain region connections are formed in those first 5 years, which means the things that you don't remember are impacting you the most. Super annoying, right? Then come traumas, right? And trauma, to define trauma, trauma is a challenge that we don't have the resources to process through, right? And so what does that mean? That means the same thing that could be not a big deal for a 10-year-old might be super traumatic for a 4-year-old because they don't have the resources. What could be no big deal if you had sufficient family support ends up being a really big deal when you don't have that family support, right? So there's all sorts of things. Not a big deal can turn into trauma in the right situation, right? So, and that could be, some people report moving a lot as a kid was really traumatic. Some people, the loss of a parent obviously is going to be challenging. Some challenging, bullying at school, different things, right, that can really increase anxiety. From there, we add on top of that repeated events. So it's no big deal if you go to work one day and your boss yells at you and then apologizes later and it doesn't happen again. But if you go to work every day and your boss is yelling at you every day, you begin to take that on inside your nervous system. Part of what was going on for me when I was having my panic attacks is I was getting a lot of negative responses again and again from not just my boss, but the staff that I was working with. I was the only white kid in a predominantly of color program in the Bronx in New York where I did not belong. But I found a job. I need a job, right? And so it was this constant feedback that something was wrong with me. And ultimately it was triggering this deep-seated belief from early childhood that Carrie mentioned that said, oh my gosh, what is something is wrong with me, right? But I don't know what it is and I can't fix it. And so that got really triggered. And then on top of that, we have daily stress, the paperwork, the kids, the this, the bitter cold, the whatever, right? So as this slowly fills up my cup, eventually it begins to spill over. And that's the experience where the anxiety gets really intense, right? I might have a panic attack or anxiety attack or any of the above. So when we're trying to come back from the ills of anxiety, we have to slowly decondition some of these things. My advice, the tools I'm giving you guys are to try to start on some of this stuff, right? And then, seek out therapy for some of this stuff, right? Does this sense of how these things build, does this make sense? Right? So what we need to do if we want to reduce is we want to, we want to begin thinking, just being a parent, this is going to get really tangible, okay? My kids are walking through the world and they're meeting challenges, right? And those challenges are either going to be too much, just right, or too small for them, right? If it's too small, they become disinterested and they leave, right? If it's just right, they stay and engage. And if it's too much, they're going to get overwhelmed, right? Or they're going to try to push through. And if they're pushing through in the wrong way, that can be counterproductive. So our job as parents, and obviously this is way easier when they're younger and gets harder and harder as they grow older, is to help our kids identify the right challenges, right? So there's two different ways to think of simplifying. The first is the most practical and easy, which is there's too much stimuli coming into me on a daily basis. I should reduce that. I should put my phone in a sleeping bag, apparently. I don't have a sleeping bag, but it sounds like a great idea, right? But I do try to put it in a drawer, try to put it away, right? Read less news, try to limit the amount of stuff I'm doing. My kids don't do 7 sports. They're only allowed 1.5 at a time, to joke, but one and maybe a smaller one, right? Because their life becomes my life. And if they're overwhelmed, I'm going to be overwhelmed. That doesn't make sense, right? So the easy thing to think, the metaphor is, I'm trying to clean the basement. I'm trying to help my kids become healthier. At some point, I should stop shoving stuff in the basement in order to get it clean, right? So the first step is we have to stop shoving more stuff in the basement. How do we reduce the amount of stimuli that ourselves, that our kids are taking in on a daily basis, right? So one way is to prevent, but the second way is to right size. And if there's any practical tip I'm gonna give you, this is the most important and the most practical. It is begin examining on a daily basis the challenges you're taking on. Are these outside your tolerance window? Are these inside? Right? And if they're outside, we have to begin changing. We can't have 80% of our life outside our window of tolerance. Maybe 10%, but certainly not the amount that most of us take on. And the same for our children. We're trying to have them either all these advanced classes and doing all of this and doing all that. And trust me, I'm an advanced class guy. I went to Alps in Northville. I did the APs, all of that. When I look back, drama. Right? I spent 3 or 4 hours every single day doing homework. I spent most of my weekends doing homework. I had my kids. I have my business. And I would start forcing my children. I did this for years, you guys. Force my children to do quiet time between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m. so that I could go into my office and work. Why? Because I spent 12 years, 16 years of my life conditioned that I had to do that every single day. And my wife had spent years saying, you're gonna work? You're gonna work? Why are you working right now? You could hang out with us. We could go do things, right? But this was so conditioned into me, right? So I'm not saying don't put your kids in advanced classes. I'm saying every kid is different. And what we want to do is we want to think about holistically, how well can this child manage the workload, right? Do they feel compelled? Do they feel interested? Do they feel excited, right? Put them in the honors class that they like, right? And if they like English, and they really are driven towards it, right? Put them in that honors class. But if they don't like math and they're really struggling, just let them in the normal class, right? Again, I'm here for anxiety, okay? So, I'm here for anxiety. So this bears out in the research because what we're finding is most of us grew up understanding intelligence as a single continuum. IQ, how smart are you? How well can you do on the SAT, right? The reality is we have multiple kinds of intelligences. So if we can identify our or our children's unique type of intelligences, usually of this list, I'll go through it, they're gonna have 2 or 3 that they're high in, 2 or 3 they're medium in, and 2 or 3 that they're low in. We want to help encourage their highs, right? Set them up for challenges there. We want to help, kind of help them build a little of the middle, right? And help mitigate the negative. If we can figure that out and do that for them and empower them, then by the time they're, insert arbitrary number here, 14, 18, whatever, they will be able to feel a better sense of self, knowing, hey, I'm good at these things, I'm okay at these things, I'm bad at these things, I'm gonna stay away, right? My dad's in construction. I identified very early that I was not a construction type, okay? And I'm just not, he hangs out with all these blue collar guys and do all, it's not me, right? If my dad said I had to do that job or I wouldn't be okay, right? As happens to a lot of kids, right? I would be really messed up. Versus my mom was like, hey, looks like he likes talking to people. We should figure out how, so she put me in theater and I was in debate and, so she tried to help me take what she saw as my strengths and put them in the right category without overloading me so that those things then became unpleasant, right? So, types of intelligence. We'll start over here. Spatial, visualizing the 3D world, right? The interior designer types or, people, I suck at this. Naturalist, understanding living things, nature, gardening, right? People, plant moms, dads, animal people, right? Musical, discerning sounds, pitch, tone, rhythm, timbre, right? Then there's logical, mathematical. This is, again, what our culture says is really important, right? Quantifying things, making hypotheses, proving them. Existential, tackling questions of why we live, why we die. My now 4-year-old, he was like 3. He was like, what happens when I die? How long am I going to live? I'm like, oh my God, this kid. Right? This is great. I like it. Interpersonal, sensing people's feelings and motives. Bodily kinesthetic, coordinating your body. I have a buddy who owns a chiropractic clinic. He's a sports guy who's a lax bro. He's very physical. really know much about my body. String bean twig thing that just kind of hovers under my head, right? So, not high for me. Linguistic, finding the right words to express what we mean. Language people, right? And intrapersonal, understanding yourself, what you feel, what you want, right? So as we're going through this, think about, where am I strong? I probably have 2 or 3. Think about each of your kids. Where are they strong? Are they just attracted to plants for some reason? Are they vibing on some cool bops? On their dad's old iPad? Like, what is it that really sings to them? And how can we set them up for opportunities to go do that? And how can we mitigate opportunities where they're forced to, if they're not logical, mathematical, and they're comparing themselves to a friend who really is, we want to help them understand that. That's okay. You don't need to be good at everything. You don't need to be great at everything, right? You're going to have strengths and weaknesses. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. This is so important for anxiety, right? We're trying to really unwind some of the things that we have been taught. I saw a hand?
Yeah. So one question I had about this is an element that we struggle with and we try to do at home, but my kid's 16 now.
Yeah.
Sorry. So he's one, he's in a forced environment, right? Like your day is decided for you, where you'll be is decided for you, but they want more independence at this point. Yeah. He kind of knows a lot of these things about himself, but is in a constant state of being assessed, getting feedback, and maybe, kids aren't great at understanding. One of them's good at linguistic and one of them's good at physical. Like they don't, everything's from their own. So like he's exhausted by the end of the day. Yeah. Like, so to how to help him assess his day in ways that he can bring some of that noise down for himself is really difficult at this point. And the thing I'm stressing with most of myself is we can do it at home, but is visible when he walks in the door.
For sure. And so you mitigate what you can, right? Yeah. So you have conversations about, hey, what classes feel good and what feel bad, right? Mm-hmm. And you help them find the right, how hard are you supposed to try, right? What are the expectations and comparisons in your head? What would happen if we lowered that, right? And lower may be the wrong word. I adjust that, right? Yeah. Right size that, right? I know this sounds crazy, but helping your kid understand it's okay to get a C in math might be a real game changer. Helping your more introverted child to not expect to have 5 friends, but maybe just 1 or 2 really good friends. We have to help them find that metric, right? The biggest tool in your arsenal is vulnerability. When I was in high school, I felt blank. When I was in middle school, I was blank, right? I tried to get all my friends to like me, and then I recognized in the end, I was ignoring the friends that did like me because I was trying so hard to get the ones that didn't to like me. If I could go back, I would spend more time with the people that felt a little easier, for example, right? And so these narratives, right? Kids are narrative creatures. So are adults. Humans are narrative creatures, right? They want to hear stories. So instead of just, hey, you should do this, or have you thought about this, that's a little abstract. A 16-year-old can engage with that, but an 8-year-old needs a story. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Is that helpful?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other questions? Great, feel free to chime in at any time. So understanding these multiple, oh no, it's going to do the thing. The same thing happened to me that happened to Carrie. Hang on. You stop doing it and then it gets angry again. It's like you don't exist anymore. Okay. So the idea here, again, just summarizing, is that we want to find a way of helpfully reduce what's going on in our children's lives, okay? Because of time and how this works, we're going to be able to get a little more deeply into the third and not very much into the last 2. Unfortunately, that is the 45-minute program. But I do these longer, so if you're interested. The third step, which is this accept, is a process we might call mental digestion. The idea here is we take a piece of food, like an apple, right? And we eat it. And there is a waste product and potential energy. Yes? Okay, the same is true with emotional content, okay? We don't want our kids to not experience negative emotions, anger, sadness, guilt. We want our kids to learn how to process negative emotions so they can digest them. A lot of us in our generation, we're maybe the tail end of it, but our generation and older, we're taught to try to manage emotions, right? Control emotions. But what happens is we lock and suppress all these things away and we never learn from them. The byproduct of emotion is wisdom. So if we don't process that emotion in a healthy way, then what happens is new triggers for the same thing get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? The new problem that 5 years ago would have only been 5 out of 10 is now a 7 out of 10 because I packed this guilt away, and now this thing triggers my guilt, and now the guilt is way heavier than it would have been, right? So we accumulate these unprocessed emotions over time from childhood, from adolescence, from adulthood, right? Generally, we'll have an emotion we're better with and an emotion we're worse with, or two, right? For instance, I grew up, my mom made it totally okay to cry, it was totally okay to be sad, so I have a really healthy relationship with sadness. I cried at the start of today's presentation, right? Like, it's no big deal. Anger was always cued as unhealthy. I wasn't allowed to be angry. Anger was bad, right? So today, if my wife gets angry at me, I try to make it stop. If I get angry, it's usually too big, too much, right? Because I never learned how to healthfully work through the anger. So that's been something I'm working through the past number of years. Okay? Does this idea make relative sense? Okay. So for us as parents, and then for our children, we want to help them first learn how to identify what I'm feeling. So this project felt overwhelming. What are you feeling about it? Are you angry that somebody didn't understand? Are you scared that it's going to have a consequence down the line? Are you feeling guilty because it makes you feel like you're bad or wrong? Right? We could have tons of different reactions to the same project, problem, interpersonal situation, right? So we want to identify that emotion. Then we want to learn how to feel it. I can give you categories, right? There are, sometimes you need to do something physical. Go for a walk, go for a run, do some yoga. Sometimes you need to do something creative. Listen to music, play music, draw, different creative sort of things. Sometimes you need to do something linguistic, have a conversation with a friend, a parent, journal. Like, there's all kinds of different options, but you got to figure out what works for you. Carrie is mentioning she's a music person. I'm a music person. If I'm feeling sad, I have playlists that just let me work through that, right? So, or I watch a movie that helps cue a particular emotion. I'm not talking about binging Netflix. I'm talking about intentionally saying, hey, I know this movie is going to help me get to this particular feeling, right? I'm going to, again, normal stuff, talk about it, right? Journal about it. Nothing too crazy, but I want to begin this process of intentionally learning to work through my emotion. In therapy, I teach people how to do it in the room so that then they can carry it out and do it by themselves. So if you go, okay, I like this idea, but I need training on it, then go to therapy, because that's what we do, is we teach how to process emotion, right? And so as I said, as we process and feel, we're going to experience something called catharsis. Who knows what catharsis is? Ooh. I want to help all of you. So catharsis is an emotional release, right? So you cry and then you feel lighter, right? You punch a pillow and then you feel calmer. You go for a run and you come back feeling more clear. At the end of the day, the number one indicator is, do I feel lighter or heavier? Right? Sometimes you cry and you don't feel better afterwards. I feel heavier, right? I didn't cathart. I didn't process that. That wasn't real processing. It didn't work, right? So if I feel lighter afterwards, I processed. If I feel heavier or the same, I didn't. That catharsis, that feeling lighter, right, then produces a waste product I can release and let go of. People spend years in therapy trying to figure out and understand and identify, and at some point, it stops being helpful to figure out, and you just need to let go, right? If you're, trigger warning, fecal matter, okay? If you're pooping, do you try to play with it and examine it afterwards? No? We let it go, right? So if you sit down, for anybody who has sat down to try to meditate, the first thing that happens is your brain's going, right? That's brain poop, ladies and gentlemen. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to analyze it. Don't try to sort it and categorize it. Just let it go. And if you can get better and better at letting it go, letting it go, letting it go, 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, 40 minutes later, whatever it is, your brain's going to be calmer. Why? Because you let it poop. Okay? The biggest issue today, why is mental health so much worse? Like Carrie said, there's a bunch of different reasons, but my number one reason is because we've taken away all of the empty space. There is no empty space. Right? Empty space naturally allows our nervous system to process and release. If you're walking 2 hours to the local town to buy some corn seed, and then walking back, right? There's tons of empty space and time for your brain to do what it naturally does. If you're on TikToking, right, or reels or whatever you do, right, it's filling up all of the space. If you're going to the bathroom and reading something, right, I'm doing that sometimes, then there's no space to release, right? So the biggest thing in that third step is to recognize and accept we've got all of this stuff stored up, and we need to release it, right? So step 2 is simplify, stop shoving new stuff in the basement. Step 3, we're trying to begin getting some stuff out of the basement and cleaning it up and sorting it out and organizing it. Disclaimer, at the beginning, you have to pour a bunch of crap on the floor before you can organize it into boxes, right? So it can get messier before it gets cleaner, okay? So I'm gonna wrap up here, we got about 5 minutes. Just to say, this is a couple pics of my little cute family. Sam's my third. I've done a lot of therapy, you guys. My parents had me in therapy in 2nd grade for ADHD. I went in and out. I took medicine from 2nd grade to 9th grade, got off medicine in 9th grade, went back to therapy to figure some executive functioning stuff out in the next room. Grew up, went out into the world, had my panic attacks, went back to therapy. Got better, figured that out, began teaching people how to do it, had my first kid, started getting angry, went back to therapy, right? I mentioned EMDR, trauma therapy. There's therapy and there's therapy, right? And some of us, I encounter these days, most people I encounter have been to therapy, right? It's like, I get it, right? I talk about my thoughts and feelings, but the reality is that so much of this is stored in our body. It's physiological. We call a set of therapeutics somatics, which is to say we have to deal with the physical and emotional, not just sitting and talking. And so I used to do sit and talk therapy, and I don't do that as much anymore because it doesn't really move the needle forward on the subconscious emotional stuff that's stuck, right? So these pictures look all nice, but from my child 1 to 6, I was intensive trauma therapy doing this work to try to heal. So I would be lying to you if I said it was quick and easy, but I need to be honest and tell you it's messy, so that if you do decide to go through some of this stuff, you know that it's not weird that it takes a little while. It's not weird that it's painful. All of that is normal, but that may be a potential pathway to healing that allows you to engage with your child differently. One of my themes of these talks is, I know you want to help your child, but your ability to help your child will be directly proportionate to your ability to help and serve yourself, okay? So, quickly, right, fulfill, who's ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs before, okay? Some of you, there are systems for understanding what our needs are. Maslow's is one I really like a lot. My body has needs, right? I need to eat, sleep, all that. Safety needs, I need a house, but I also need a reliable income. I need some level of also routines and consistency and structure. I need connection and relationships, family, friends, loved ones, right? I need a sense of esteem, who I am, what's unique and special about me, the work that I do in the world. And then this cool fancy stuff called actualization. How do I be the best version of myself humanly possible and continue to grow? Again, I could spend hours talking you through this, happy to do so in another talk, but being aware that there are these needs, I tend to have people assess on a week-to-week basis when they begin some of this, how well met were each of these needs sets this week, right? And then I can rank them and I can say, oh, this 7 out of 10, 5 out of 10, okay. Where do I want to focus, right? Well, this week, I'm going to focus on safety. And I'm going to try next week to come back in and have a 6 or a 7 out of 10 instead of a 5, right? How do I better meet these needs? In the same way that you will be cooking or buying food for the rest of your life for your family, right? Mm-hmm. These needs don't stop, right? You're always going to need to eat, but you're also always going to need safety. And you're always going to need connection. And you're always going to need a sense of self. So we want to figure out how to create sustainable practices that allow these things to come easier and easier and easier over time. So think of it like a tree growing roots, growing thicker, more robust, more evenly distributed roots. If I have one big root and that root gets cut off, I'm screwed, right? If I have a large encompassing root system that brings in a lot of my needs, I'm going to be happier, healthier, and more fulfilled, okay? We want to learn how to identify our needs so we can help our kids to identify their needs. So often, Novi, Plymouth, we're spending so much time up here with our kids, and we're not spending enough time down here. Routine, rhythm, consistency, It doesn't have to be dinner every night, that's a good idea, but whatever routine or rhythm in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night we can give, a sense of predictability, a sense of structure, not forcing it on them, helping them to co-create, right, what that looks like, okay? So I always wrap up, I'm not gonna be able to go super deeply into this, the long-term changes, but the research shows us that there are 6 long-term changes that can make the most difference in your anxiety, your child's anxiety, and your family. I encourage you not to do all 6 at once. I encourage people to take it month by month. I'm gonna focus this month on one thing, I'm gonna get really good at it, and then next month we're gonna move to the next thing. So I'll give you the rest of January off. February, you're welcome. February is gratitude month, okay? Can we take even 2 minutes to think about the things we're grateful for? I try to do this every night with my kids before bed. What's one amazing thing about your day? What are 2 things you're grateful for today? February is gratitude. March is stillness. Try to take 5 or 10 minutes a day to just be still. No phone, no TV, no electronics, right? Just still. Do this together with your family, right? We can read, we can listen to music, right? It's gonna be, for your younger kids, it's easier to just make them do it. For your older kids, if we don't do it together, they're not gonna do it, right? March, stillness. April, movement. Some kind of movement, right? Going on a walk together, going on a run. Yes, they have their sports. What are you doing for yourself, right? We can either, again, do this separately or together. February, March, April. May is kindness. Help your children begin to identify kind things they can do in the home for each other or outside of the home. What's one kind thing you did today, right? It changes neurochemistry. Belonging, right? Finding a sense of people that you can belong with, that you can be yourself with. When I look back, social was always a big struggle for me. When I look back, turns out my parents were weirdos. We did not have family friends. So I never really learned how to socialize. They never really taught me. I had to figure it out on my own in school. And that was just, oh, go and make friends. Well, no, how do we do it, right? If you don't have a group of people you belong with, that you can then model that to your kids, that can be the most important starting point for kids who are struggling with connection. And then finally, creation. I've lost my months. That's okay. Finding 5 minutes a day where you can create something, even if it's just doing a little drawing together or something, right? But it could also be bigger, writing a song, sewing a quilt, I don't know, right? These are the 6 most researched, best tangible things you can do. But again, I would encourage all of you to recognize how your child triggers your anxiety and your stress. And the more you can heal yours, the more you're going to be able to help your child through theirs and navigate it. Yes? Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It was so